years ago, and we never knew of this ministry of ungentlemanly warfare. Why did it take so long for this part of World War II, this great untold story, to finally come to light?
Well, because these guys were doing something so secret, so subversive, and so illegal that it had to be kept under wraps for all these years. Basically, the story is of 6 maverick eccentrics who were given employment by Winston Churchill to devise a wholly new way of fighting a war that would involve sabotage, guerrilla warfare, assassination, all the dark arts of warfare. So subversive that no one in the country was allowed to know about it.
More subversive, more dangerous than the World War II atomic bomb, more than the Enigma machine, which allowed us to read their mail. This was more secretive than all of that?
Well, it's interesting you raised the atomic bomb, because one of the projects my men worked on was a project to stop Hitler getting the atomic bomb. Now, Hitler, to build that bomb, he needed something called heavy water. And in the 1940s, there was only one place he could get that, which was a factory in Norway that produced this heavy water. The British realized that this factory had to be knocked out. It was absolutely essential. But to do so was very difficult. The factory was inaccessible. It was surrounded by a minefield. It was guarded by Gestapo. So what do? They train up a small group of highly motivated saboteurs and guerrillas. They train them up, they supply them with specialist explosives and weaponry, and then they parachute them in to destroy this factory. This is the sort of thing they were doing, things that were absolutely pivotal to the Allies actually winning the war.
You also write in the book, Churchill's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, that they were also responsible for destruction of the docks in Normandy. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Hitler had the Tirpitz, was the biggest battleship he had, an absolutely lethal ship to be unleashed on the British and American convoys that were going across the Atlantic. The Allies realized that there was one thing that would stop Hitler deploying this battleship in the Atlantic, and that was if they knocked out the only dry dock big enough to service it, and that was in Saint-Nazaire on the west coast of France. And so they hatched a plot to send in a bunch of commandos, again armed with specialist bespoke weaponry and explosives, to go and blow this place up. This was the biggest dry dock in the world. It was not easy to blow up, so they had to devise this extraordinary mission to send these men in undercover and blow the place to smithereens.
How come Germany couldn't replace any of their tanks and trucks once they were destroyed?
Well, what they would do, for example, the German tanks and trucks and armored vehicles, many of them were being produced in the Peugeot factory in France. Peugeot, of course, famous for making cars. But the Germans had taken over what was the biggest industrial plant in Europe, employing 60,000 people, and they had them all making cars for the German army. What the British did, they sent in a small group of saboteurs once again into the factory, and they would destroy all the machinery. They'd blow up all the key parts of machinery that were making these tanks. And it put the factory out of action for many, many months. And when finally the Germans got replacement machines and they had them outside in the courtyard of this factory waiting for them to be installed, saboteurs once again went in and blew them up. Again, a brilliant act of sabotage that stopped the German army getting the supplies it so desperately needed.
Giles Milton, what was this ministry doing when the American boys and the English boys were storming the beaches at Normandy?
Yeah, there was very, very close cooperation between the Americans and the British, obviously in the general fighting of the war, but more specifically in special operations. And, today's special operations really date from this time. So just before D-Day, Eisenhower really recognized that sabotage was going to play a very, very important role in stopping the Germans bringing reinforcements up into Normandy, up into Utah Beach, Omaha Beach, and the British beaches. So these teams of 3 men, either 2 Americans and 1 Brit, or 2 Brits and 1 American, sometimes with a few French involved as well, they were sent in behind enemy lines simply to blow up bridges, to blow up railways, to blow up viaducts, to destroy infrastructure that the German army would depend on to try and defend those beaches that the Allies were storming.
So you're saying this was coordinated with Eisenhower as well?
Yeah, Eisenhower certainly knew about it. He had been persuaded by Churchill and others that sabotage was not just some on the periphery of warfare, that this actually needed to play a vital role in stopping the German bringing, their Panzer divisions, their crack SS troops up to the beachhead. So absolutely Eisenhower gave it his blessing, his sanction, and actually after D-Day, he wrote a report saying that it played a crucial role in the success of D-Day itself.
Giles Milton, our guest. His book is called Churchill's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. You mentioned these six, or any of them, none of them are alive, are they?
None of them are alive now, but what I did, because obviously this is a very, very secretive story, and there's very little documentation in the archives, I went back to the families, I found their surviving members, and asked them if they had any records. And what was extraordinary and what made the book such a pleasure to research was, one of them, his daughter-in-law, who herself was in her 90s, she had an entire spare bedroom full of archived material, documents, letters from Churchill even. So it was on the basis of this original material that I was able to build the story of as you say, which has never really been told before.
And this was Churchill's idea to sort of start this guerrilla warfare?
Shortly before Churchill had become Prime Minister, a small group of men who were fascinated by the whole idea of subverting the rules of war had got together and formed a secret group. What happened when Churchill became Prime Minister in 1940, he learned about this secret group, and from that point on, he gave it not only his blessing, but he showered them with money, he gave them all the support they needed. And so it grew into this formidable unit, really, that was not only training saboteurs to be got behind enemy lines, but building the bespoke weaponry that were needed for crucial acts of sabotage. So it was an operation that covered many fields. And also they had what was known as the Killing School up in Scotland, which was a top-secret location where these saboteurs and would-be guerrillas were sent up there to learn how to kill brutally, effectively, with their bare hands and with knives. It was a dark and nasty business, which is another of the reasons why it had to be kept so secret.
You mentioned in the book, Giles, sticky bombs, but in Saving Private Ryan, Tom Cruise's character talks about sticky bombs. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, it is. This was a very early invention. The problem with the British grenades at the time is you threw a grenade at a German tank and it would explode and do absolutely nothing because the German tanks had such thick steel weaponry on them, or armor, if you like. What the sticky bomb did, it was a very ingenious device. You threw the sticky bomb at the tank, it stuck to the metal for a moment and exploded while it was stuck to the metal, causing an almighty explosion which would send a sort of tidal wave of shrapnel into the middle of the tank, killing everyone inside. So it was a major development because it meant that an infantryman could at last knock out a German tank on the field of battle.
Giles Milton, what's been the response since you have released the book?
I think people are really surprised about this story because everyone in my country, and probably a lot of people in America as well, know about Bletchley Park and the breaking of the Enigma code, and it was made famous in The Imitation Game, the film recently.
Yeah.
What very few people realize is that both the British and the Americans were developing a whole new form of warfare, which was highly effective, which involved really attacking the Nazi army at its weakest points, its supply lines, etc. And I think what's fascinating about the subject really is that we can trace this through in a line through to today, that warfare today with special operations, with sort of drone warfare, all this stuff really began in 1939. So it's a whole new branch of warfare that was being born.
You're kind of saying, Giles Milton, that this is a form of Hogans Heroes.
It's a form of what? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
The TV show Hogans Heroes.
Yes, I mean it is. It's a big, colourful, but dramatic story, and I think it will surprise a lot of people to know just the sort of dirty tricks that were being considered by Churchill and senior leaders, like, as I said, Eisenhower as well.
Yeah. Was Churchill, did he set these guys on his way and never to hear from them again? Or was he in constant contact with these guys, directing them as he did with the rest of the war?
Churchill kept in very close contact with them, partly because Churchill himself had an absolute fascination, a passion, if you like, for unconventional weapons. And so he used to go down to their weapon station where they were building these things and developing them. He used to go down at weekends and have a go at firing them himself. And there was one very amusing occasion. He invited General de Gaulle, the leader of the Free French, down to come and witness one of these demonstrations. And, of course, Churchill hated de Gaulle. And one of the missiles almost took de Gaulle's head off. And there are many people that said, as a joke, of course, that perhaps Churchill had bribed the engineers working there to try and take out de Gaulle while he was there.
Giles Milton, if this Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare didn't exist, would the war have turned out differently?
I think it could have done. I mean, I think what they did is they certainly shortened the war. This is what Eisenhower said as well, that their actions brought the defeat of the Nazis that much closer, that much nearer. Would Germany have won the war without these guys? I can't say that. But I do think they definitely shortened the war, and they successfully crippled Hitler's highly mechanized army by in some ways, very simple but very creative means. And I think the legacy of these guys is perhaps their creativity, their out-of-the-box thinking of plotting unusual ways to bring about somebody's defeat.
Giles Milton, the new book is Churchill's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, the Mavericks Who Plotted Hitler's Defeat. It's a brand new book. Giles, one more question for you. Did you write a book when Hitler took cocaine and Lenin lost his brain?
I did. You see, I spend a lot of my time in the archives, and I'm forever turning up pieces of information that are extraordinary, that I didn't know before. But they're not worthy of an entire book. So I kept these things as footnotes from history, if you like, and then we combine them all into one book. They're a bit of fun, and I hope they're stories that people won't know. For example, what the title story there is all about Hitler's drug habits, the fact he took cocaine and a cocktail of other drugs. So they're sort of entertaining and interesting stories from the archives.
Did he do it once, or was he a habitual user of cocaine?
Oh, no, he was a habitual user. Certainly by the end of the war, he was not only using cocaine, but he was taking testosterone, he was taking all sorts of things that would lift him up, speed, amphetamines, etc. He was taking up to 60 tablets, medicines a day, drugs a day, all of them prescribed by his personal physician. And it's interesting that this is another story that had been completely forgotten until a few years ago. The notes of Hitler's personal physician were found in the archives in America, and so this story came to light. Again, it sheds extraordinary light on the craziness of Hitler's mind.
Giles Milton, a couple of books, When Hitler Took Cocaine and Lenin Lost His Brain, and his newest work, Churchill's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Giles, thank you for your work. Thank you for your time. Good luck with the books, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. Cheers.
There you go. Giles Milton, Churchill's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Who knew? What a world. 924, Big 5.